Moon phase. Is it lunacy? Tidal displays useful or eclipsed by other more relevant complications? Which one is more of a moon watch? Get ready to be moonstruck and gain some appreciation for the many ways where our hobby of watchdom collides with the moon. The moon has an influence on more complications in watch history than you may think. If we take the month display, the month is originated both linguistically and in terms of its meaning from the moon and the lunar cycle, with the new moon to new moon period being 29 days, 12 hours and 44 minutes. There had to be some nudging about to make this fit with the 365-day solar calendar based around the Earth orbiting the Sun, as the numbers didn't really add up, but it still holds that the basis for today's month was originally the lunar month. So your month display is actually a moon-related complication. Fun fact is that because the lunar month is slightly shorter than our calendar months, means we occasionally get the phenomenon of a blue moon, that is 2 full moons in one calendar month, which occurs around every 2 to 3 years, hence the expression, once in a blue moon. Of course, there are multiple other names for specific moons, like hunter's moon or blood moon, harvest moon, wolf moon, supermoon. Even if we take the day display, we see an influence of the moon there, with Monday or Moon Day originally revolving around the worship of the goddess of the moon among Nordic cultures. But the complication most associated with the moon is, of course, the moon phase. Using markings to track the lunar phases goes back to prehistoric times, like this circa 6000 to 9000 BCE calf bone of a baboon with lunar markings. This was also an important focus of the incredible Antikythera mechanism from ancient Greece, which I've discussed elsewhere. They define the moon with multiple gods like Artemis, romanized as Diana, and Luna, romanized as Selene. A reference I can't resist here is that Selene had 50 daughters with Endymion, known as the Menai, meaning months, that represented the 50 months of the Greek Olympiad, which was a 4-year period, which could also be measured by the Antikythera and is the reason we have a 4-year period between the Olympic Games. The lunar phases move from new moon to waxing crescent to first quarter, to waxing gibbous, to full moon to waning gibbous, to third quarter to waning crescent, and back to new moon. Lunar phases were an important part of early clock history, with cathedral clocks having prominent moon phase displays, even before we knew that the sun was at the centre of the solar system. For example, the Hampton Court clock. From at least the end of the 16th century, German and English clocks were including moon phase displays. More modern clocks and pocket watches would deploy the moon phase, with the classic display being the dial with 2 moons that rotates over the 29.5-day period, concealed by 2 humps on either side to indicate the waxing and waning of the moon. A great example is the incredibly complicated Patek Philippe Packard pocket watch. Moon phases would first start to be deployed in wristwatches from around 1925, with this autumn Patek Philippe model as part of their first perpetual calendar. Rolex also made an iconic moon phase watch in 1949, and there are some different ways of grouping moon phase complications. First, the level of precision moves all the way from things like the Seagull Red Star moon phase chronograph watch, where the moon phase is essentially taking place over a 30-day period, and you'll need to reset it every couple of months, to models with a 59-tooth gear that can get some decent precision, to high-end models with 100 to 200 teeth gears and gear trains that can get precision into hundreds and thousands of years, to astronomical grade moon phases with watches like H. Moser, Erlanger and Zerner, Patek Philippe and Oxen Jr., and the absolutely bonkers Andrea Strella Lunar Perpetual that has accuracy up to 2 million years using the Remontoir de Galatée mechanism, with the newer Lunar Exact adding in a moon age complication. In the words of JFK, they must do such things not because they're easy, but because they are hard. Second, the design of the moon phase itself. The vast majority of moon phase complications adopt the classical format with the stars and 2-moon dial, sometimes with month and or date indicator, with some variations over time on the design of the moon itself like the man in the moon and other phased moons, through to the more realistic looking versions with texture added to show the craters and such. But there are some new approaches to presenting the moon phase, with some examples being this one from Hermes, the Arnold Sun and Perpetual Moon Watch, and the 3D Lunar Magna. Christopher Ward's Moon Glow and Christian Vanderklau's super accurate 3D moon phase are other interesting examples. This Cartier watch uses the tourbillon window on demand by pressing one of the pushers to display the moon phase, and Baume & Mercier also do some cool moon phases in both mechanical and quartz. The third way of considering this complication is the type of watch within which the moon phase is being deployed. The classical use of the complication is more within the sphere of dress watches. However, there's also been field-style tactical deployments, such as the Glycine moon phase and this Zinn model with moonlight indication. Moon phase isn't just in the realm of the mechanical watch either, as we have a nice quartz example like this Cartier Santos with moon phase, as well as within automatic quartz with the Seiko Kinetic range, and solar with the Citizen Eco Drive. Of course, the moon phase display is now also used in some digital watch ranges like these G-Shock models, including the Frogman and the Casio range, such as the W753, that have an LCD version of the moon phase, the super popular classic Casio Moon Graph showing age of the moon, phase and angle, and one of the coolest I've seen is this Yes range watch, which has a very cool moon phase including moonrise, moonset, and percentage illumination visualization. A related area to lunar phase that I have explored more in another video is the planetarium watch, which sometimes includes the moon, with this Van Cleef & Arpels model, Graham's Orrery watch, and Louis Moynet being good examples. Towards the simpler end of the spectrum, use of the sun and moon as indicators of day and night, essentially as an AM and PM indicator, can be seen in models like the Orient sun and moon, which sometimes folks mix up with moon phase. Another complication that can be layered onto moon phase is solar and lunar eclipse indicators. There are mechanical iterations of this from Christian Vanderclaw and the Hublot Antikythera sun moon. The Casio Cosmophase is also able to provide solar eclipse details, due to these dates being stored within the watch rather than arriving at them mechanically. Eclipse-inspired watches are another angle, like this beautiful Van to Black Moser in C with red gold that looks like the corona. The final moon-related complication I will mention is the tidal display, showing the high tide around every 12 hours and 25 minutes. The connection between the tides and the moon has been known about since ancient times, and tide tables such as this one from St Albans Abbey from around 1250 linked age of the moon to high water at the London Bridge. In the late 17th century, the detail-oriented first astronomer royal in England, John Flamsteed, really upped the detail in his tide tables and links with the moon, which would have been taken up by Isaac Newton and leveraged as part of his broader work on gravitational force, which explained why there were 2 tides a day caused by 2 bulges, one pulled by the moon's gravitational power, with the bulge on the opposite side being explained by complex mathematics linked to orbital motion that is beyond my small brain. As the Earth spins on its axis, places go through these bulges, which are the high tide, with the low tide being the point in between. Tide and time are very interrelated. For example, our word for tide comes from the German Zeit, which means time. Time and tide wait for no man, as they say, and like clockwork, each high tide arrives every 12 hours and 25 minutes. There are mechanical iterations of tide displays showing the ebb and flow of tides, like this Christian Vanderclaw watch, and many sailing and surfing watches include tidal displays, like the G-Shock G-Lide range, often combined with moon phase displays, and brands focused on this area like Rip Curl, Nixon, Vestal, and the analog smartwatches of Verit. More simplistic examples are the use of tide bezels like this one on the Timex reef gear. Of course, tides also link with the behavioural patterns of fish, so fishing-focused tidal displays are also another moon-related complication, with watches like the G-Shock Fisherman, Casio Fishing Time, Fishing Gear, and ProTrek. Outside of complications, there are of course watches that have been worn on the moon, on the Apollo 11, 12, 14, 15, 16 and 17 missions, which, surprise surprise, are primarily Omega Speedmaster professionals. Reference ST-105012 was the moon mission version, with reference ST-105003 being used during training in earlier missions. Later, Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins would wear the 145012, and apparently Armstrong in his own daily life wore an Omega CK2605 from around 1954. It sounds like it is possible that the Apollo 17 pilot Ron Evans' Rolex GMT Master made it onto the moon in a personal preference kit, or PPK, carried by his colleagues. And of course there's the famous story of Apollo 15, David Scott's glass popping off his Speedmaster, which he replaced with his own personal early version of the Bulliver chronograph, which later sold at auction for $1.6 million. To draw the link with our previous category of watches, there is no Mega Speedmaster Professional Moon Phase watch that is METAS certified. One model I'll briefly click into, as it taps into a very mysterious part of the moon, is the Omega Dark Side of the Moon. The dark side, or far side of the moon as astronomers more accurately refer to it, as it does get sunlight, is a side we're unable to see from Earth, as the nature of the moon's orbit and its tidal lock status with Earth means we don't see around 40% of its surface. The coolly named Lunar Terminator separates our perceived bright side from dark side. The Apollo 8 mission astronauts were the first people to see the dark side of the moon up close, which was commemorated in the Apollo 8 limited edition. The only way the rest of us have been able to see its features is through photos from satellites, like these original ones from the Soviets. More recently, the Chinese lander Chang'e 4, named after the Chinese moon goddess, has landed on the far side of the moon with the Yutu-2 rover, named after her companion the Jade Rabbit, which opens up many more possibilities for understanding it further. One of the mysterious facts about it is that it doesn't have all the dark grey patches that we're used to seeing on the bright side, as there hasn't been seepage of hardened lava onto the surface due to the crust being significantly thicker and pale looking. One of the leading theories of how we arrived at this scenario is that the proto-version of Earth known as Gaia and another small proto-planet known as Theia collided, with some of the spill-off material forming the moon, which is why we share much of its material, with the theory being that we may have had 2 moons that over time merged into one another as they came closer together, which resulted in this thicker crust on one side. The link to this mysterious part of the moon makes this particular watch seem much cooler to me. Of course, more recently amongst all the planetary options is the moon-themed Swatch x Omega Speedmaster, notably including the Dot over 90, which is a topic that Speedmaster historians geek out on a lot, in a similar way to the writing on the back of the case, which has multiple variations over the years. We've covered real-life moon watches, but fictional moon moon watches are another angle. For example, in Moonraker, Roger Moore wears the Seiko Memory Bank calendar, Sam Rockwell wears a Diesel DZ7076 in Moon, and there is the model that Hamilton made for Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey. Moon-inspired watches is another angle, for example the recent G-Shock The Moon GM2100MG, and finally, moon-related materials that have been used in watches. Romain Jerome included moon dust on the dial of their Moon Dust DNA watch, which included use of fragments of material from Apollo X-1, Soyuz, and the International Space Station. The Analog Watch Company have made a watch from moon rock collected by the Soviet lunar probe in 1974, and of course there is the Omega Speedmaster that has subdials made from slices of moon meteorite found in Antarctica and certain deserts. And that's it for today's video. If you'd like to learn more about space-themed watches, check out my video on watches in space. Or if you want to learn more about solar system focused watches, take a look at my Casio Cosmophase video that covers the history of that topic.